All right, all right, all right. to quote my good friend from Interstellar, I don't know why I did a Matthew McConaughey, but hello, good evening, welcome, greetings, Trekkies. My name is Michael, aka the Trek Lad. I hope you are doing well. Greetings, everyone. Well, that was something, wasn't it? Episode 2 of Picard has dropped, and hopefully you've all seen it, because I'm going to get into spoilers big time. If you've not seen the episode, go watch it, then come back. This will be available to replay pretty much as soon as I'm done here, which could be another 3.5 hours. I don't know yet. Really depends. Like last week, it is going to be a frame-by-frame analysis, yes, of the Star Trek Picard Season 2 episode, Penance. Dark, deliciously dark, although dark with a lot of surprises, actually. Very, very different to what I was expecting, and maybe what you were expecting as well. Come join me in the chat. Come say hello. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. And yeah, join me as we go through the episode from start to finish, picking it apart, going through the stuff that I liked, talking and explaining a little bit about the stuff that I didn't like, and explaining perhaps what I could have done a little bit differently if someone was insane enough to hire me in Hollywood to write stuff. Before we do get into this, if you haven't already, please consider liking this video / live stream, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. I would love you forever. Also, I have resurrected, similar to Picard, it's now in a bit of a robot body, but I have resurrected Treklad on Patreon. If you want to support the channel, consider becoming a fan on Patreon. One tier only, that's all I need, really. One tier, $3.99 a month, will gain you access to the exclusive Patreon community. The more important stuff, though, the stuff under the line is more important. Access to a private Discord server where I hope to talk Star Trek with all of you. It's a bit desolate at the moment, to be completely honest. I only have one patron, so shout out to Matt at Prankasher Productions. Thank you very much, sir. Other stuff, behind the scenes content, I don't know what that looks like yet, but I will work some stuff out. Members only live streams, so if you're a patron, you will be able to join me for some special members only stuff, basically. First refusal on live stream appearances, so if you want to join me on these live streams, that will be your prerogative. Priority comments during live stream, so I will prioritize what you have to say. Exclusive voting power, TBC, and yes, like my good friend Matt, you will be credited in every Treklad live stream video and podcast. Sounds like a good deal, doesn't it? There we go. Go to patreon.com/Treklad to get started today. Yeah, there we go. I don't know why I did it like that. But right. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I thought of the episode before we do get into it, because I think it's quite important to kind of add some context to this. So if you joined me last week, you will know, and if you're familiar with me and familiar with Treklad at this point, you know that Picard Season 1 was not for me. It was not my thing. It was not my bag. Last week's episode, the premiere episode, really surprised me. And I think it surprised quite a lot of people. I'm seeing a lot in the media about how Picard as a series seems to be rejuvenated, revitalized. And, that's great to see. I mean, I had high hopes for Picard. I'm sure you guys did too, that it was going to be the legacy, follow-up, continuation, whatever you want to call it, that we were all hoping for. Now, if you enjoyed Picard Season 1, that's absolutely great, and I know plenty of people that did, and if you're one of those people, I mean, we gotta like our own stuff, right? It's very important. I didn't get a lot of enjoyment from Season 1 of Picard, but the first episode, very pleasantly surprised. I'm still cautiously optimistic. I still think that the bottom could fall out of this show. Star Trek, modern Star Trek, always starts really strong because they want to kind of get you in, and they struggle to kind of close and wrap up those storylines. That's still a very real possibility here, but very impressed with what I saw in week 1. Week 2, I would say that I probably enjoyed it a little bit more, actually. I have to say, I probably enjoyed it a little bit more, which is crazy because I really liked some of the stuff that we saw in episode 1, the return of Starfleet, the Stargaze, Rios on the bridge, that whole kind of feeling that it very much felt like a continuation of the Star Trek that we know and love. And so this episode, very much, it's exclusively set in this dark, totalitarian nightmare that Picard is absolutely disgusted with, and we all are disgusted with it. I mean, it's horrific and it's a nightmare. But I really enjoyed what they did. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is still a lot of dumb stuff in this show, in this episode. There's a lot of stuff, and I will get to it piece by piece as we go through it. There's a lot of stuff that I'm like, I'm not sure. Some really obvious stuff, and some stuff that maybe would constitute nitpicking, but we will see. Throughout this breakdown, throughout this analysis and review, I will do my best to essentially kind of go through each scene, kind of going through the meat, what happens in each scene, and then what I'll do is I'll give you my thoughts, things that I noticed. There's a lot of it here, so yeah, we will let's get into this. But first, thank you very much in the chat. Sisters, good to see you, my friend. Chris, good to see you, and Thomas, a first-time viewer. Yeah, thank you for joining. I'll have a lot to say. The last week's live stream was 3.5 hours. I want to kind of beat that, actually. No, I don't. I want it to be fairly... I want to improve. I want it to be a little bit more succinct, maybe. But, at the end of the day, it will go as long as I need it to go. So by the end of this, I feel I never have to talk about it again. That's the aim. It's therapy for me too. So right, let's get into this, shall we? So we start with a very similar shot to what we saw in the first episode of the first episode of Picard, the first episode where we got a nice kind of opening, establishing shot of Earth. Now here, though, Earth looks very, very different. And last week, what I did is I pointed out the kind of planetary defense shielding. Now, I was not sure if the shielding that we saw in last week's episode was just kind of encasing Picard's home. As it turns out, it's encasing most of the planet. An interesting thing that I've also noted as well is we see the shield go up. The shield seems to be taking priority in certain areas. It kind of makes sense. I mean, we can see here there's no discernible land mass. It looks pretty much ocean. It looks like it's just ocean, really, although it's kind of hard to make out. But a thing that I noticed, and we'll get to it later on, is there's a shot where Rios is approaching Earth, and it seems to me like there are some continents and some countries that aren't actually protected by this shield. It's kind of weird. Like, I wonder if in this nightmarish future, if certain kind of key strategic areas, land masses, are protected by this shield and some others aren't. Potentially, third world countries don't get the same preferential treatment. Could be that I'm reading too much into this, but it did seem to be gaps in the planet's atmosphere, which I found really interesting. We'll get into what the actual shields are for. The other thing that I found really interesting as well is there was this kind of wail, like this, like a bomb siren going off as we kind of pan in on this nightmarish vision of Chateau Picard. It's never brought up again, and I'm not sure why the siren is sounding. Could it be, thoughts here is, could it be that it is a siren that gets sounded first thing in the morning, maybe? I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what time it is. I'm assuming that it is the morning, but there's a siren. It's like a bomb siren. It never gets mentioned again, so I'm assuming it's a siren to, I don't know, like a cockerel, like it's the beginning of the day and you get woken up with bomb sirens, nightmarish stuff, but it's never brought up again. So I'm assuming that it's to mark the beginning of the day, and it is no ordinary day in this horrific future. We find ourselves pretty much where last week's episode ended. Picard, very confused, very disturbed by what he's seeing. It's not going to get better for you, mate. And Q follows him into the courtyard. What draws him out is the sound of the sirens. So I just kind of assumed that there would be some sort of kind of reason for that siren. Anyway, they look up and they're seeing the shield envelop the planet, which is a cool little visual, and it does get mentioned again in a second. So Picard, he asks, what is this? And Q replies that it's home, and more of that Q kind of never getting kind of a clear answer from him. And Picard asks about the crew of the Stargazer, and Q responds, "How quaint, how provincial, how yesterday's Enterprise of you," which is it's an interesting line, isn't it? I think it's just a throwaway line. It's just hey, I'm Q, I'm omnipotent, and I'm gonna say stuff that's gonna get the fans kind of cheering and whooping, going, "Hey, I remember that." I think of all the characters in the Star Trek universe, Q's pretty much the only character that can do who can do the kind of the breaking of the fourth wall. He's like Star Trek's Deadpool. He can say things that no other character can say, because really no one knows yesterday's Enterprise, but he does, and perhaps I would speculate that the Borg Queen does as well. Yes, Esther. So it was an air raid, incoming attack siren. So I took from that it was an imminent kind of attack, but we don't get an attack. So so I was confused. I was like, okay, so I just assumed that it was pretty much kind of what Chris is saying, cockadoodle elimination day. So that's kind of what I took from it. We get the nice little kind of wink to yesterday's Enterprise, and Q then confirms, and he's doing this in a very kind of mocking tone. It's very unusual for Q. He seems way more edge than we've seen before, and he's sarcastically referring to Picard being so human, to show someone a world of their own making before being asked what he has done. But the thing is, I do feel like Picard kind of has reason to ask, what are you doing, Q? Because I mean, let's face it, Q does have a history of doing stuff like this, but Q seems really just flummoxed by, legitimately kind of confused by why Picard is asking these questions. And it's kind of strange. Picard, he's tired of being Q's pawn, and Q very interestingly responds by saying that Picard is underselling himself. He's not a mere piece, but the board itself in which the game is played. Very, very weird, very interesting, very cryptic, very Q-esque things to say. But there is an edge to this Q. And then what we get is we get Picard, and it's the first swear of the episode, and I'm not really that bothered about swears anymore. Although I will say, hearing Patrick Stewart say bullshit, it's kind of weird. Anyway, Q finger snaps Picard into his vineyard, but before he says that, he says this line, and I really, really like this line, and it's really stuck with me since watching the episode. Picard wants Q to get to the point, or cut to the chase, as Q phrases it. And Q, I mean, this picture really kind of perfectly captures, there's like madness behind the eyes. He's almost shaking. Q tells Picard that the chase was cut, it's bleeding, dying in Picard's arms, and that Q is but a suture in the wound. Very poetic, very modern kind of Star Trek productions of having very wordy kind of eloquent sentences together. But delivered with a lot of intensity by John Delancey. And very, I mean, there is something really, really wrong here. I mean, what does it take? What the stakes are really being driven home by Q is scared. He's shaken. He's furious. What is going on? Q snaps Picard to the vineyard, and it's very similar to the establishing shot in the last episode. Very differently, though. There's no hands in the vineyards. There's no machinery that we can see. There's no Laris, which will come up very shortly. And Picard says that it's he's confused. He says that the harvest was only that morning, and again, a very interesting line from Q, and we'll find out exactly what it means later on, as he says, same time, same day, different harvest. Obviously, Picard is driving home. He's still confused. He wants answers. And Picard once again says, what is going on? Where is the crew of the Stargazer? And again, another good line. I mean, this opening scene, everything that John Delancey and Q says is just gold, but there's just a lot of different feels to this Q at the start of this episode. But he says that so Q basically admits to intervening in the battle in the final sequence that we saw last week. He wanted to see Picard, so he sought out the nearest explosion, which I don't know. That's perhaps a little harsh, right? I don't know, but I did like it. I thought it was a kind of a cool, very very Q line. But Picard's confusion is now starting to turn to anger, and he demands that Q stop patronizing him. And something happens that I don't think we ever thought that we'd ever see, and it was so jarring to see it. But Picard very just heatedly tells Q that he's done with this patronizing, and Q hits him. Yeah, Q slaps him across the face, and it's very well edited. It's this kind of shot, snap. It's almost like we as the viewer kind of feel it. And Picard's quite shocked by this. Picard, through all of the years and all of the adventures or misadventures with Q, he's never been slapped by him. I mean, Q's been hit by people on the other side before. Q's been hit by Cisco. Q, I mean, probably off screen got hit by Janeway. But Q's never actually hit any of our heroes. And here, he's hit Picard. And more of those very chilling looks. And Q says to Picard that this isn't a lesson. This is not... he insists that this isn't like what has happened before. This isn't one of his games. He says that it's a penance. And he snaps his fingers, and the record player starts playing, which starts playing the French song, and I'm not going to be able to do justice to the name of this because I don't speak French, but the song is called Non Je ne regrette rien. Probably could have said that a little bit better. If you watch movies, this might remind you of it was used heavily in the Christopher Nolan film Inception. It was used as a kick. It was used to kind of snap people out of their dreamlike state. But the song actually itself here takes a bit of a new meaning, because the song title, Non Je ne regrette rien, translates to No, I do not regret anything. So what it does is it's juxtaposed, because what we have is Q basically demanding that Picard atone and beg forgiveness. But we've got a record player in the background, basically the song saying, I don't regret anything. It's very, it's unusual. And this played at the end of the last episode as they were on the bridge of the Stargazer. So yeah, it's very... I'm sure the song will come to have more meaning as we go forward. Interesting. Anyway, the attention is drawn to the energy field, and Q has more interesting things to say. Q asks Picard if he likes the skies here. And in this history, humanity has found a way to save the planet. But then this time, they've just kept the corpse, as he says, on life support. I don't know if you caught me earlier. I broke down the Strange New Worlds teaser trailer that we got a couple of days ago. And I was remarking that the inclusion of the turbines in the Pike horseback scenes were potentially Star Trek's opportunity to tell stories about climate change and things like that. And I think it's obvious that in our optimistic future of Star Trek that we do find a way to overcome these problems. But here, essentially, what we've done is we've probably, and this probably actually explains what I was speculating on earlier, where there are holes in the ozone layer. So perhaps this isn't just. I'm going to go back here. Perhaps this isn't just protection from Earth's enemies. This is protection from the sun itself, protection from the damage that we've done to our planet. Really powerful stuff. And yeah, it's interesting to see if that might potentially kind of rear itself down the line in this dark universe. I'm not sure. I don't know how much of this timeline we're going to see moving forward, but very very kind of wake up call kind of stuff here. Picard then gets snapped into his kitchen, his pantry. Now, one thing that initially confused me when first watching was the fact that nobody kind of lifted up their head, which you would understand once we kind of know a little bit more about what this universe Picard is kind of like. My first thought was surely people would be just kind of surprised to see Picard kind of appear out of nowhere. I don't know. That was my kind of thought. I'm sure they're not used to their master just kind of, popping in just out of thin air. I'm also assuming by conversation that happens later on in the scene that Q he's not visible to anyone. But horrible discovery here. We find out that this universe's Picard is keeping slaves, and they all appear to be Romulan, and Picard is absolutely horrified at this. Some interesting kind of stuff here is because you do see some of the Romulan slaves that kind of look at Picard, and the look is bordering on just loathing, which obviously is fine. We do see some mixture of fear, yes. I mean, there's a lot of fear there, but there's also this kind of, particularly from this chap, there's a feeling that I hate you. And these servants would harbour those feelings for sure, but they would probably keep them a little bit more quiet here. I mean, this guy at this table, I mean, it's a look of dejection, and I mean, it's the look that you would expect, I guess. But absolutely just shocking. Just fearful Romulans, which, is a radical change to what we know from our universe, where many Romulans, I mean, I'm assuming now in season 2, hold him in such high regard. Yeah, just terrible to see. Q sarcastically asks how Paradise could be run without staff and why they had to pay for help when they had alien slaves. Picard insists he would never do such a thing, but obviously, I mean, the proof is in the pudding that one Picard obviously does. And Q says that such moral convictions were the luxury of the victors, and then beckons Picard into another area of the house. I did notice as well that Q says "come" in a very similar style to how Picard would say "come" when someone wants to enter the captain's quarters or any kind of room that the captain inhabits. So an interesting kind of little wink and nod there. I'm assuming it's just unintentional. But yeah, so Picard wipes his bloody nose and follows Q down the hall. And here's where we get a really shocking scene, and punctuated nicely by just some wonderful lines by Q. And now we see but through a glass darkly. Yeah, it gets shocking. It gets worse. We see some interesting little artifacts, and what I wanted with these screenshots is to show some real nice Easter eggs here. Now, obviously, this is a Cardassian outfit. It looks different to the Cardassian armor that we'd seen in Deep Space Nine, for example, with this kind of bronzing down. You would assume if the entire universe has changed, then clothing would change as well. And it is a little bit different, but it's unmistakably Cardassian in its design. We also see this. Now, this took me a while to work out what this was. This is the the torchbearer that we see in the very first episode of Discovery. So interesting that what we're seeing in Picard is an attempt to kind of reconcile the various different kind of Klingon looks. Some people might not like that. I don't mind it. I don't mind it. I mean, they could probably easily pass that off as not being Klingon, but why would they do that? But yeah, that is the torchbearer. I think it has a different name than torchbearer, or lightbringer, or lightbearer, or something like that. But that's Klingon from Discoverse. We also see some weapons. This looks like a very first contact era assault rifle. It's not. It's actually the rifles that Seven used in my favorite episode of all time, Stardust City Rag. I'm not sure what that one is, although for some reason I'm thinking that it might be some sort of Jem'Hadar. But I mean, the mount, it looks Starfleet in design. Well, here we see some more Klingon weapons. So we get more of that kind of attempt to reconcile the disparate kind of canons or looks. But that's very much a TOS movie era disruptor that we first saw in Search for Spock. Again, another little tidy reference to Search for Spock. And here, a Romulan disruptor pistol. I can't remember. That looks to me like that's a disruptor pistol from the Kelvin universe, from the 2009 Star Trek movie. I could be wrong. I am not 100% sure. We see a lovely glaring reminder to season 1. Cheers, guys. The Jadvash disruptor rifle and a dagger. This weapon, I'm unconfirmed. I'm going to have to look a little bit harder on the archives for this. And I've read it online that this could be Shinzon's knife from Nemesis. I watched Nemesis the other night trying to find the actual knife. I'm not sure if it is, because the blades are a little bit closer together and there's a little bit more symmetry, and obviously symmetry makes sense in Nemesis. So I'm not 100% sure, but let's speculate for a second that it is Shinzon's knife. There's blood on this knife. So what if in this universe, General Picard, one of his famous victories is killing himself? Because you would imagine the Romulans would probably, in their desperation, try and clone Picard and try and replace him to potentially, save them from war. So that whole storyline could actually still be a thing. And Picard in this timeline just gleefully killed Shinzon, didn't really care about it, and the voice echo, the voice triumphed over the echo in this universe. Picard, as you can imagine, all this is horrifying. It gets worse. Yeah, there's a skull collection in this room. Oh my god. Now, interesting here, and we see proof that this could be the Grand Nagus himself. I'm not sure if it's going to be Zek or someone else, but we see the Grand Nagus' staff later on as we kind of pan out and get a bit of a wide on this room. Some interesting things that I didn't realize anyway. I did not know that Ferengi actually had bones in their lobes. Obviously, we have cartilage in our ears, but they are aliens, I guess. So, okay. Interesting. I guess the reason why they had to do this was because, I mean, it's such a distinguishing feature of the Ferengi, right? That if you just took that off, you wouldn't really know who it was. So I don't know. I don't mind it. I'm not bothered by it. But we also see a Borg skull as well, and I want to talk about this in a little bit more detail in a minute. We've got more skulls to go through, as you know. But some interesting things here is just to see the depth of assimilation in Borg. It's quite shocking, really. They literally embed themselves into the actual bone of the victims. Yeah, awful stuff. But not as bad. Picard just murdering everyone and having a skull collection is just another level of terrible. We see more skulls. We will get to these in a second as well, because Q is going to relive some of Picard's conquests to the absolute horror. And there we see what I think, anyway, is the Grand Nagus staff, which also looks like it's broken. So what if in this timeline, Picard snapped the staff over his knee and then, I don't know, killed the Nagus with it? I'm far too quick to put these horrific fantasies together. Awful. So yeah, we see more. There are some skulls that I can't actually make out. There are two that don't get spoken about at all. This one here, I have no idea what this is at all. And maybe that's the point. This one looks like a Lurian, Linus from Discovery. Lurian? Is it Lurian or Saurian? Saurian? I think it's Lurian. But yeah, maybe it even is Linus or one of Linus's descendants. That's shocking. Linus deserved better. So Q goes through the history of some of these skulls. There are actually plaques here as well. This skull, yes, is Gul Dukat. And yeah, I mean, Gul Dukat, one of Star Trek's great villains, but in this universe was actually responsible for the synthetic body that Picard has. How I feel about that synthetic body being mentioned and brought up again, I'm not sure if it was needed. But again, I mean, I think that just kind of highlights and further punctuates just how different the Cardassians are in this timeline, where, you know, the Cardassians are an ancient race and with their technology have been able to create golems and, you know, massively advance themselves in cybernetics and things like that. And, you know, Picard just killed him, you know. So Gul Dukat was executed after a hell of a fight to take the Cardassian capital. The next skull we see belongs to General Martok. And I have to say that this skull, I don't know if this is just because they said it's Martok, but for me, it even looks like J.G. Hertzler's face. I don't know. It just for some reason, it just looks like his face. It's probably not even remotely similar to his face. And I'm not 100% sure if the ridges are. I'll have to go and look at a picture of Martok in more detail. But yes, this was Martok, killed in combat after a bioengineered virus decimated Kronos. Oh boy. And this skull belonged to Sarek, beheaded on the steps of the Vulcan Science Academy by Picard in front of his wife and son, who we know is Spock. Dear God. Interesting. I don't know if anybody else picked up on this, but this skull looks green. It looks green in complexion. It's very pale. It's very kind of hard to notice. I think the Q's hand kind of helps give the contrast and kind of give it away. But if we compare this skull to, I mean, let's assume that this is a human skull. Massive difference. Which I find interesting. I find it interesting that Vulcans have green skulls. Now we know that Vulcans and Romulans have green blood. I don't know why that would mean that they would have green bones. I mean, we have red blood, but our skulls are not red. I don't know. Science. But I'm assuming that this has been done from a production standpoint to just kind of put a bit of an alien spin on this skull and kind of make it stand out. But yeah, absolutely horrifying that it is Picard. Going back to some in the chat. So we had one person suggest that this skull could be a Jem'Hadar. It doesn't look like a Jem'Hadar, does it? I mean, Jem'Hadar don't usually have wings out the sides of their heads. I think someone also mentioned that it could be species 8472. That could be plausible, although I don't think species 8472 wear jewelry, so I'm not sure where that would have come from. I don't know. I want to quickly touch on our little Borg friend here, because and I am obviously jumping the gun a little bit, because we find out later on, you know, who's getting the Eradication Day treatment. But what do we know about the Borg? Well, we know that the Borg are a collective. There are no individuals in the Borg, and all of the skulls in this room are, I mean, with the exception of the two at the back and this Borg, very prominent characters in Star Trek lore and Star Trek history. Grand Nagus Zek, let's just assume it is him. Gul Dukat, Martok for the Deep Space Nine trifecta, and Sarek, who's a massive character in Star Trek. So these two, I think it goes without saying that if they are hung up to display if they're hung up to display in this room, who is this? Who does this belong to? Which character could this be? And I'm getting ahead of myself here. I want to go back to this skull here. Yeah, who could it be? Now, actually, yeah. Heavy Rads, welcome. Hugh. Could it be Hugh? That's very, very interesting. Now, the eyepiece is in the right place as well. So it would make sense. We're not sure, what happened with Hugh in this timeline. But still, I think it's a bit of a it's a strange thing to do, because the Borg have no individuals, so there would be no generals. So what did Picard just did Picard just did he just pick a drone? Did he just execute one drone and just say, "Hey, I'm just going to put you on my mantle, and I'm going to, alongside some of my most famous kills"? This Borg must have put up a real fight. This Borg must have challenged Picard. But the confusion is that the two don't seem to. It doesn't seem to make sense to me. Just in my head anyway. Thomas, no, not Hugh, because Picard would have sent a virus to kill the Borg. Well, maybe that's how the Borg were decimated. But the thing is we do see, as we go forward, this shot, which is wow. Now this shot shows me, or it shows us, the CSS. What's the name of the ship? It is the World Razor. The World Razor, the CSS World Razor. My goodness. Now there are some things that I want to point out here, because I absolutely love this this piece of art. It's a little, the way it's been shot, it looks like an oil painting. But there are some things that I really, really like here. And I think the thing that Star Trek in the past has been very guilty of doing, particularly with alternate timelines, mirror universes, they'll just take the ship that we know and just kind of put some lines on it or a sword on it. But here we see that this future is so different that even our ships are just completely alien to us. I mean, but alien, but in a way that is just very unnervingly close to what we know. So the first thing, and I had to really kind of get a look at this, is it does seem that the primary saucer is very, very different. So we've kind of got this bowed-in section where it kind of comes in on itself, and it's got lots of edges to it. It looks sharp, and that is a constant that we see in this dark universe. The deflector dish is at the top instead of on the secondary hull, and it doesn't, it seems to just be firing. It seems to be the primary weapon, as opposed to actually doing its job and deflecting. But we also see phaser lances, and we see phaser, we see torpedoes coming from higher up instead of in the neck. The nacelles seem completely different. The secondary hull seems reinforced, kind of like with a ribbed hull. It looks very, very different. And yeah, what we can see is it's absolutely beating the crap out of it could be one cube, it could be two, this could be one here, this could be one here. But perhaps maybe this is the Borg's version of the Battle of War 359. Maybe this is the decimation of the Borg. And perhaps Thomas, to go back to your comment, maybe what Picard and the Confederation did is they did unleash a virus into the Borg collective, and then with their armada just went and absolutely wiped them out. Maybe this virus was designed to inhibit the Borg's ability to regenerate. Maybe it disconnected them from the hive mind, and leaving them in this kind of discombobulated and very vulnerable position. Then the fleet goes in, just absolutely destroys them. And maybe this is even the conquering of Unimatrix Zero or Unimatrix One. So yeah, lots of different things here, but such a thing. You look at it for the first time, and you go, wow, okay, this is, I mean, it looks at glance like the Enterprise that we know, but it's so different when you zoom in and see the details, and it's so alien from what we, and by extension Picard, know. It's very, very jarring. And Q is, it's strange because Q seems to be taking some enjoyment from these revelations. So all of these skulls, all of these victims killed by the same withering hand, by the most ruthless and bloodthirsty general of the Confederation of Earth. And that is, yes, that is Picard. Shocking stuff. Picard asks what this hellhole is, because I think that, what kind of question is left? What is this? What is this absolute hellhole? I love the question. And Q says that it's the only life that this Picard has known. And he offers him two choices: stay in the body of a madman and try, like Macbeth, to wash the blood from his hands. Another really good line, and obviously calling into Patrick Stewart's love of Shakespeare. Or the alternative is to seek atonement, or perhaps forgiveness. Q then says to Picard that he won't have to make him do it alone. Obviously, that's kind of teasing what we're going to see in the rest of this episode. But yeah, Q then suddenly disappears. Picard has more questions, but Q is gone. He's gone. And the synth Harvey enters. And Harvey asks Picard, if he's okay. Because I'm assuming Harvey's just... This is not the Picard that Harvey is used to dealing with either. But Picard says that he doesn't feel well, and he doesn't know who he is anymore. And I think, quite frankly, if you've just been presented with a gallery of some of the most famous people in the galaxy, all killed at your hands, I think that would cause a personal crisis. So I can't say I blame him. And that's it. That's the end of our opening sequence. So yeah, a lot to break down there. That whole sequence, very, very interesting. The thoughts being that this is a very different Q to any appearance that he's made before. There's urgency. There's this fear. There's this stress. And Picard even says, you're not well. And to which we get no answer. So, speculation for a second. What if we don't know what it is yet, but the spatial anomaly that we see in episode 1, the emergence of the Borg, the Borg Queen that's suing for peace and acceptance in the Federation. Is there a bigger threat that isn't just affecting, or isn't just threatening space that we know, but also Q's realm? What if the continuum has been affected by something? I don't know if it's a virus or if it's something more powerful than the Q. Can you imagine? But whatever is happening, it seems that Picard is directly linked, intrinsically linked to whatever is going on. And they've got to put it right. And as Q says, seek atonement, and instead of spending a life in the body of this madman. Powerful stuff. I was aware that they were going to be doing something very different with John Delancey's Q. And when I first read those reports, I wasn't sure if I liked the sound of that. I didn't like the idea that they were going to potentially take this jester-like character who is so powerful he doesn't really care about anything, and make him brooding and grungy and emo. I didn't like the sound of that, but it seems that there's a reason for this behavioral change. It seems that there's a reason that Q is acting the way he is, and hitting Picard as well is so shocking, so weird and alien to see. It's perhaps more shocking than the skulls that we saw in display, although they were something. But yeah, so we end the first sequence, and after the credits, we get this lovely establishing shot of the vineyard, and just some good cinematography here. The vineyard looks quiet and untended too. I'm assuming it's being worked on by probably General Picard's legion of Romulan slaves. Picard is sat down and he's reviewing hollows of his Dark Universe doppelganger, and this is really just driving home the hammer that they're in a bad place. They're not in the place that they are used to, and this Picard is he's basically making a speech claiming that the brave crew of the CSS World Razor, he had fought for a pure universe, that he and his crew subjugated savage civilizations and boldly conquered warlike alien worlds. Now, this to me, I don't know if you got this impression when you were watching it, this sounded so much like a dark and twisted version of the our mission is to seek out strange new worlds and go boldly where no one has gone before. And it just seemed like a really dark, strange inversion of that. And yes, definitely came across as a very kind of dark propaganda. But also, it felt to me like it was a bit of a call to action. It was almost like being done as a recruitment video. He points his finger and he says he's obtained greater wealth and resources for future generations of humanity, and he's basically using this as a join the Confederation, join whatever the dark version of Starfleet is. Very kind of Uncle Sam in its delivery, and he ends with this line which really causes Picard to just grimace, is a safe galaxy is a human galaxy. Just shocking words to hear being said by Jean-Luc Picard himself, and no one is more disgusted at hearing those words than Picard. Really shocking to see. The world gets even more bizarre when Harvey brings to him what we know. I mean, it looks like an espresso, right? It looks like a coffee. As it turns out, Picard is not a fan of coffee in this universe. And the one thing that I do like about that is that we do get a bit of a... There's a bit... It's hard to kind of be, to joke in this universe, but there is humor peppered throughout this episode. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. I kind of laughed at this. The universe for Picard is so alien that he can't even stomach the fact that his doppelganger drinks coffee. We find out from Harvey that it is a Colombian blend, a Colombian roast. And so I think that's Picard, who's not going to be having any more of that coffee. He says a line, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but he is referencing Dante's Inferno, and just kind of, I'm in hell. I'm absolutely in hell. And I was just like, it's a very kind of Shakespearean of a thing for Picard to say. He once again asks Harvey for some information on Laris. And he looks it up, and he confirms that Laris and Zhaban were leaders of a Free Romulus movement, and both were killed at the gates of Romulus. And some more interesting, more dark dialogue here is he offers to show Picard tribute photos that are on display at the Museum of Conquest. So this society is brutal. They take pictures of their slain enemies, and there's a museum dedicated to the brutal machine of war. It's just shocking. And yeah, this news obviously deeply saddens Picard. Of course, it was. Laris is his dear friend, and last week they were taking steps to maybe turn that into something more, and to find out that he's down. He's one less ally here. Who, I mean, let's face it, if Laris was alive in this universe, she would hate Picard. There would be absolute contempt and hatred for Picard. So what we then get is Harvey reminds Picard that there's a shuttle coming to take him in 2 hours. They're going to the presidential palace. Picard, he's trying to get in character at this point. He demands to know why the great general is being called to the palace, and Harvey informs Picard, much to this shocked face, that it is Eradication Day. And that ties in, I think that kind of gives us the answer to what Q was saying earlier on when he said, same time, same day, different harvest. Good God, to live in this universe. So that's the end of that scene. We then go to San Francisco, where we see more of the shields. We see, we hear an announcer call for citizens to enjoy Eradication Day. This voice is, I've gone back and I've listened to it, it's very different to the voice announcer that we hear later on this episode, which I think is going to be very important and is going to tie into what happens in the next episode and perhaps over the rest of the season. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, in terms of what we see here, the skyline looks very different. Of course, it's the future, dominated by these force fields. But it looks very industrious. It looks actually, I mean, it's hard to tell, but no, at first I thought that was rubble, but maybe it's just some lower rises. That next shot is, I think it's quite fair to assume at this point that this is Seven, and she awakens abruptly. The computer in her apartment identifies her as Annika, and we see a few unusual objects, some that we'll see again. And I actually think the scene's quite good in how it sets up how all of these objects are used. We also see this, which we've seen in the teasers, we've seen before on Harvey's shoulder, on his arm, is that this is clearly the emblem of the Confederation. So some things that I wanted to, potentially at the risk of going too in depth here, which that's what I'm doing anyway, indulge me. So what I get from this is, obviously this is a very dark, twisted, different version of the Federation. We see here, I'm assuming these represent planets and these represent the orbital patterns, but they're chained, they're linked to other planets, and they're all linked to the familiar icon that we know from our universe, but it's different, it's twisted, it's got a sharp edge, and planets are linked together, chained together. The mirror comes into action, and Seven/Annika is just shocked at some of the things that she's seeing. There's no sign of assimilation. There's no Borg implants. It's all gone. It's all gone. And obviously, as we also see in a second, she notices that she's got a wedding ring. What does that mean? Seven then goes through a series of kind of protocols, which are really interesting. The thing that she scribbles on the wall here, I can't remember the exact name of the equation. It's a very famous mathematical equation. It's known as the beautiful equation. The reason being that all of its components marry up really, really well. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because she is a former Borg. She grew up in the Borg, and what are the Borg seeking? They're seeking perfection. So it makes sense that she would scroll down the perfection equation, right? I don't know. I liked it. She then goes through a number of sensory tests as well, and I like it. It's clear that her Borg conditioning is driving this. It's very It's driven by process. It's driven by procedure. She wakes up. She's in an unknown alien surrounding. She doesn't know what's going on. What's she going to do? She's first going to test to make sure that she's not in a dream. She writes the equation on the mirror. She tries to burn herself, and she comes to the conclusion that she is awake. She is not dreaming this. And it gets weirder because this guy, who we will then find out is the magistrate, walks in along with another F8 droid. And some of the things that this gentleman is saying is very strange. The door chimes. She thinks that it's Raffi, so she calls out for Raffi. But instead, this guy walks in. An interesting thing, I'm sure you know it already by now, but this guy is John Briones, who is in real life the father of Issa Briones, Soji, or Daj. So a nice little piece of family connection here. Cool to see. The magistrate refers to Seven/Annika as dear quite a lot, and sweetheart and things like that. Now, I was kind of confused about this initially, but yeah, we'll get onto it. But he then addresses Seven/Annika, we'll just call her Seven, addresses Seven as Madame President, which is, well, obviously going to be confusing. She does go to pick up the object that we saw in the establishing shots, obviously, probably to protect herself, to probably bludgeon this guy over the head. But I think it's clear that he is not there to harm her, and they've got work to do. And yeah, being called Madam President, quite a shock. Yeah, they go into her office, and the magistrate is going on about a speech that she's got to give, but also gives her updates on insurgents in Okinawa, and also report on what is going on at Vulcan. She looks up reports, and she sees that, well, we'll get to those. She sees that Rios is deployed on the Vulcan front line. He's assumingly leading the assault. Some things here that I find quite interesting, and things that I hadn't actually noticed before, is we see some shots recycled from season 1 of Picard. We see the Martian attack. We see the La Sirena attacking the Romulan warbird. That's a bit of a goof. That's going to be a goof. And we also see the artifact. I didn't actually notice those the first time around. I'll get onto those lights, but that shouldn't be the case. I'll get onto those. There are some great Easter eggs in this sequence as well. So we see on the screen, it's there for like a split second. But some of the things that we see on screen is there's an Andorian rebellion. The field officer in charge of that is a Lieutenant Colonel Tasha Yar. Yes, Tasha Yar is leading the Andorian rebellion. Just more tragedy for Tasha Yar, really. It seems like the only universes that she thrives in are dark, terrible, awful universes. More Easter eggs here. We see that there is an ongoing Dominion Alliance war, which is being led by General Miles O'Brien. Yeah, I know, crazy. Also, from the notes, it says very, very quickly that Rios is going up against the Vulcan field commander, who is Tuvok. Yes, interesting. Also in this scene as well, while they're talking about this, Seven is basically asking for communication. She's asking to speak to someone, and the magistrate says that she can. He offers to basically bring in General Sisko for a briefing on the Vulcan War, which obviously is interesting, because I would have assumed that the person leading that would have been. Well, I would have assumed that he would have been leading the Dominion War, but obviously this universe is very different, and it's put our characters and our heroes in very, very different places. Someone online did mention that it might not be the Sisko that we know. It could actually be Jake Sisko, had he not taken up a career and life as an author, which would just be so tragic to see a character that we know and love be deployed in such a twisted way. But I assume that it's more probably referring to General Ben Sisko is probably the character they're referring to. So yeah, some shocking stuff. I want to quickly talk about the whole Magistrate and Seven thing being married. The first thing that I want to just point out is that this Photoshop is awful. It's just awful. And I know, look, TV shows and movies, they do this all the time when they're trying to like build a backstory for characters who are, clearly Jerry Ryan's not married to John Brianis, but can you imagine Christmas? They're not married in real life. They needed a mock-signing up, but the Photoshop is shit. And I know it's only for a second, but they could have, I don't know, they could have hired me. I would have done a better job. But yeah, basically what this does is this serves as confirmation that she is in fact married to this guy. And it's really strange. I don't know, it's just a strange kind of pairing. Because I just assumed that this guy was like her aide, and that they just maybe had a really close relationship, and maybe he was just going, "Hey, dear," that kind of stuff, just affectionate terms, or maybe saying those things because he feared that anything else would result in death. I don't know, but no, it turns out that they're married, and he is kind of performing like a first gentleman duty. But perhaps the reason why they don't refer to gentlemen in this universe, and again I'm just wildly speculating here, is because in this universe there are no gentlemen. They're all killing people and chopping heads off and going to memorials for victories of war and stuff. So it doesn't make sense that this person would be a gentleman, the first gentleman. No, he is the magistrate. Cold title for someone who we do find out is going to be a bit of a challenge, let's say. But Seven basically asks for comms be opened so she can speak to Rios. She becomes adamant. She asks for coffee and privacy, and she asks for a secure connection to Rios. Now, interestingly, in this kind of first scene, that we already see that the magistrate is a little kind of, are you okay? Are you all right? You're acting really differently today. So, but yeah, Seven isn't having any of that. She kind of puts this mask on in the same way that Picard had done in the last scene, and she basically just says, "No, do as you're told. I want a secure channel. Put me in touch with this Rios chap." And that takes us into the next scene where we see Rios. He is piloting the La Sirena, or a similar version of it anyway. Now, the thing that I do want to point out is there's some differences to the La Sirena and ships of that ilk, and they are not their engines aren't the same color as the blue that we're used to. And I've got I want to speculate on a couple of reasons as to why. Bright yellow here. I'm just going to go back a few shots. But yeah, you can see there that doesn't make sense here. So boo production. Boo. That's a nitpick. But yeah, the engine is bright yellow. Now, this could be indicative of a hotter, a universe that has a bit more fire to it. It's more warlike. Red is the color of war. This isn't obviously red, but it's a hotter color than blue. A reason this could be a different color, and I was speculating on it earlier on. I was thinking about this as another way of making this just a dark, brutal, totalitarian nightmare of a universe. Is what if these engines are using some sort of different kind of fusion to the ones that we're used to? What if their method of propulsion, what if their engines are actually potentially harmful? Maybe they're using pollutants in their fuel, and they're and they're actually doing harm to the fabric of space. They've trashed Earth, they've destroyed most of the quadrant, they've chopped the heads off everyone who is of significance and consequence. So I don't think it's a leap to potentially assume that their ships might be harming space as well. And that could be potentially a callback to a season 7 episode of TNG, where we find out that warp drive is actually harming the fabric of space. Maybe they arrived at that same conclusion in this universe and just went, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. So interesting. But anyway, we are joining Rios as he and a squadron of very similar ships are taking on the Vulcan frontline forces. The Vulcan ships, I believe, are the same ships that were used in Discovery season 1 to season 2. So the Vulcans are basically trying to fight with ships that are a few years old, a few hundred years old at this point. Okay, fine, doesn't matter. It's a throwaway moment, but it's still, I don't know. Maybe there could have been other ships that could have been used. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't matter. But another thing that we're seeing here as well, and basically to come into the scene, Rios is jolted forward. Now, the first thing that was going through my head on my second watch actually was this is being told. The chronology of this episode is a little bit strange because you would assume that Q would bring all of these people into their doppelganger bodies at the same time. But what I'm kind of seeing here is I'm seeing Rios come to, confused about where he is. But in the chronology, Seven is already woken. Picard is already woken. Why is Rios only waking up now? I don't know. Obviously, from the from the drama, the storytelling standpoint, it kind of makes sense, right? Because it's our introduction. You couldn't just have Rios having already worked it out, and it's fine. It's just it's something that kind of stuck in my head. I was like, oh, so he woke up at a different time? Did Q zap him into this universe at a different time for the purposes that he knew that Seven would want to communicate? I don't know. It seems to me like it's a little bit of a contrivance, but it's acceptable. But he's looking around. He's confused at what's going on. I mean, he's probably wondering why he's on the La Sirena. He's in very, very different uniform. There's explosions going on. He's a bit shocked by all this. He speaks to his colleague, who is reassuring him that they're on the front foot and his tactics are working, and it's clearing the way to stomp the green blood. So using racist terms for Vulcans. And he sees, it's shocking to see that Vulcan is being bombed. It looks like, to me, thermonuclear detonations in the atmosphere. So in this situation, in this scenario, the Confederation are clearly on top. He gets an alpha priority message from President Hansen, Seven. And we see the icon up there once again, Office of the President. And opens the channel. He takes a second. He hesitates. He's still not sure where he is, what's going on, but he answers. And it's a really interesting kind of back and forth between these two, because Seven kind of starts speaking very vaguely, and she wants him to speak about anything that seems kind of out of the ordinary. And it seems to me like there is some kind of this guarding, because you would imagine that Seven doesn't want to give away the fact that she's not herself, because she'd be removed, secure channel or not, if she's speaking to a Rios who is not the Rios that she knows. Then this would be reported for sure. And I'm assuming Rios himself is hesitant to give himself away as not being Rios, because the president would know that there's something wrong and he would be killed. So it's a very kind of tense situation. And what we get is it's Rios who's the one that kind of breaks this deadlock, and he goes Seven, and obviously Seven is what she would identify as, and she's very relieved at this. We're all relieved at this. It's a very effective back and forth, and I quite enjoyed it. But basically, she asks if he has any idea of what's going on, and he doesn't. He hasn't got a clue, and he says that if being dead looks like D-Day over Vulcan, then something has moved them. Something or someone has moved them. Seven recalls him back to Earth on presidential authority, wanting to speak face to face, and Rios just hightails it out of there. Why wouldn't you? So it's interesting. Sapko, no, it's actually Rios who says Seven. That's obviously why she says, she speaks to him first to go, is there anything out of the ordinary? But yeah, go watch it again. So yeah, it was a well-written scene. I liked the kind of the tension before Rios kind of breaks it by going 7. And yeah, it's well done, but just shocking visuals again, just more kind of affirmation that this universe is terrible, and we want to get away as quickly as possible. We see a nice, initially anyway, we see a nice shot of Okinawa. Again, a return. We know that the Daystrom Institute is there, and well, things don't look nice for long because, time is not on this skyscraper side. We see a bomb, reduce it to rubble. Now, one thing that I do want to point out, and obviously this is something that was probably unavoidable given, they're filming on location. But a quick couple of things here. Is the skyscraper from The Dark Knight? Yeah, and that's a Ferris wheel. That's a Ferris wheel. No one's having fun in this universe. No one. Why is it there? It's there because that exists there in real life. But I don't know. If I was production, I'd probably eliminate that to. I'd scrub it. I'd use some software to get rid of it. We can't have fun in this universe, guys. We see Elnor. Elnor's also coming to and thrown to the ground. Elnor gets thrown to the ground a lot in this episode, and he's on the run. And there looks like there's been some Romulan uprising in Okinawa, and he's confused. He has no idea what's going on, and there are bombs going off all around him, and he's joined by this resurgent, this freedom fighter, who basically is celebrating this. What's going on around them. He's got no idea, but she's rejoicing. She's counting the explosions as retaliation for Cardassia, Andoria, the Klingon homeworld, Vulcan, and Romulus. And basically, this scene serves to give Elnor all of the information that he needs, and to kind of get him up to speed as to what's going on. Unfortunately, this young lady, her joy is short-lived. She is immediately shot and killed, and I don't know. I mean, it's a brutal world that they're in, but it kind of sucks that this character is literally her only job is exposition to Elnor and then dies. It's kind of sad. I mean, I guess they had to get her out and so they could move the story on. But yeah, just very unceremonious. I hope she got paid well. But he's, Elnor's in trouble. He's being pursued. He's being chased, and he meets a dead end. But help soon arrives. Help soon arrives. Yes, in the form of Raffi. It's very clearly Raffi, and Raffi is able to save Elnor against his potential would-be executioners. Now, it is interesting, and I'll get to it in a second. I do also want to note that this the way Raffi moves her phase pistol is it's kind of robotic. It's almost like Terminator. It's quite badass. I don't know. I quite liked it. I didn't like stuff that followed here because Raffi takes off her hood, and there's this kind of the music swells and they run to each other, and I thought it was a bit cheesy. I thought it was a little bit they've only been apart for probably a minute. I appreciate that the situation is a little bit stressful on the planet, but they kind of ran to each other like two people that hadn't seen each other in an age. And maybe it seemed like an age for them anyway, but there's some happiness that they've found each other. I think maybe this might be the right time to talk about how convenient it is that they're, one, all alive in this universe, and two, all in the places that they need to be. I mean, what are the odds? What are the galactic odds that Elnor and Raffi, who are on the Excelsior, would in this universe be in the same place at the same time? I don't know. Slim, right? Slim. You can kind of accept certain things President Annika Hansen. It's interesting. It's convenient that all of the people that were on the Stargazer in the fleet have prominent positions or are alive or in the same kind of area. I just saw it as being a bit convenient. I mean, potentially a way that Q. I think it's clear that Q has just snapped these people into the bodies of their doppelgangers who are in these positions anyway. But maybe Elnor was already dead. Maybe Elnor was already dead in this universe. And Q, knowing that Picard needs his crew, he needs those pieces on the board, kind of just brought Elnor along anyway. So you can kind of answer it all away by just going Q did it, which is fine, I guess. We see more troopers arrive, and Raffi now starts to pretend that she's just going to take this guy into custody. My question, really, though, here is why didn't she just do that in the first place with the first guys? Instead of just shooting them. The reason why she did that is because they needed some pew-pew. They needed some pew-pews and they needed to run for a couple of minutes. But in universe, I'm like, well, why didn't she just pretend then? It was already established that she was chief of security. So, again, it's fine. It's fine. But Elnor is taken away, and it's revealed that Raffi is the Confederation's chief of security. We go back to the presidential palace, and the magistrate and President Hansen 7. They've arrived at the palace to give the Eradication Day address. And the magistrate, he's just asking questions, how did your conversation with Rios go? Kind of things that maybe you would ask if you're a dutiful husband / facilitator of death and destruction. Here, 7... kind of, again, she's playing this part. She's trying to keep up appearances, and she wants to understand a little bit more about this Eradication Day. I mean, it doesn't sound very good, does it? She asks him to explain why the day's so special, and the magistrate, her husband, explains that it's tradition on Eradication Day that they execute dissidents, alien sympathizers, and terrorists. And on this particular day, this particular Eradication Day is special, as they are going to be wiping out and eliminating one of the Confederation's greatest enemies, and mentions that Dr. Jurati would soon be prepared for her. So, and that takes us into this scene. So obviously 7 is using using her position, using her husband to give her and us as the viewer information. So it's a good way of getting information to us instead of just kind of doing things like news reports and all of the kind of cliched stuff. So I thought it was quite clever. Anyway, so we go into Jurati's office or laboratory, and she's just waking up. And again, so and this is probably taking some time after Elnor in Okinawa and Rios, so there seems like there's staggered awakening, which for the purposes of telling a story is fine, but my question is, why haven't they all woken anyway? Maybe it's just Jurati. Maybe Jurati likes to sleep in. But anyway, she's awoken by the sound of Spot, her pet cat, Spot 73, who I really quickly worked out was Peyton Oswald, who is well known. He's been in so much stuff. God, I can't even name things off the top of my head. I think he's had voice cameos in other Star Wars productions and things like that. But he's been around. He's a huge nerd, and it's a really cool voice cameo. So you can add Peyton Oswald to the ranks of famous actors who have graced Star Trek with their presence. He seems politically active, and he's talking about it being wrong to celebrate eradicating other people. So maybe this maybe this cat, and a nice callback to Spot as well, maybe this cat is the only sane thing with a moral compass in this universe, which is terrifying. So yeah, very, very cool cameo here. Jurati obviously quickly kind of starts working out, where she is. She thinks it's a really boring delusion if she's insane, or she thinks she might be in a strange mirror universe. I mean, she's pretty on the money there. Soon, anyway, her excellency of the president walks in. Jurati calls her Seven, which obviously this guy is already like, what's going on with my wife today? She's acting very strange. What's Seven? What does that mean? It's confused. And do you know what I have to say here, because Jurati got on my nerves last season. I think she's got on a lot of people's nerves. I didn't really like her as a character. And I found her a little bit annoying last week, but here she just seemed to find this. She found this note really well, and I really enjoyed a lot of Jurati in this episode. She came across very much like Simon Pegg Scotty in the J.J. Abrams movies, and there's this moment where she's kind of like, it's a bit hot in here, and she like turns her collar down, and it just seemed like an ad lib to me, and I kind of enjoyed it. I liked it, but the magistrate kind of questions. He's like, "Why did you just call her Seven?" Jurati's just making up some sort of, it's a thing from when we were at college or something like that, and then they turn their attention back to the matter at hand, and the prisoner. They're here to see the prisoner in stasis cell. Jurati figures out how to do her job, and she opens up this cell, revealing a Borg queen. Oh my god. Now there's another cool thing that I noticed in this scene as well. I don't know if you noticed it, but there was a very subtle music cue. It was like and I'm going to butcher, I don't do music very well, but it's like a that kind of 4-note that we hear in First Contact, and that's kind of like the Borg's theme in that film, and we get that here very, very subtly just before the stasis chamber opens, and yeah, it's the Borg Queen, a very different looking Borg Queen, not only to what we've seen in Star Trek in the past, but entirely different to the Queen that we saw last week. Now, I mean, obviously it's far more closer to the Borg Queen that we know, with the hair, with the tendrils in the top, with just the outfit in general. There are some differences though that I will talk about in a second. Obviously, this revelation that it's Borg Queen is shocking to Seven, and why wouldn't it be? And it's even kind of, the mask slips once again, and things are being said further to arouse the suspicion of her husband and the magistrate. It's made very quickly clear that the Queen is confused and things are not right, and she's very upset, and the way she's kind of twitching and reacting, there's moments when she sounds like the Borg Queen that we know, with that very kind of sensual delivery, very kind of softly spoken to kind of put you at ease. But then she will kind of jerk into some sort of very robotic kind of confused state. And this happens pretty much throughout her entire appearance in this episode. She says that things aren't right. The hive is gone and it's dead. But she's able to identify Seven as being Seven, someone that was assimilated. She even calls Seven by her Borg designation. So it's interesting. She then turns round to Jurati, who the Queen calls a fragile little teacup, and comments how she understands this feeling anywhere. And Jurati's like, well, what do you mean? And the Queen basically says it's unbelonging, a sense of unbelonging, which is interesting. And I think we're going to get some more about that later on in this episode and in the season. I think that Jurati and the Queen, given what we've seen in the trailers, kind of form some sort of bond. I'm not sure if you can call it a bond, but something happens between the two. But yes, the Queen, she switches between this sensual delivery and very confused and kind of jerking, very robotic. In fact, some of her line delivery reminds me a lot of the hybrids in the Battlestar Galactica reboot. The hybrids that we see in the actual show itself, and not the prequel hybrids that we see in the Dharma's flashbacks. This kind of very robotic delivery, but kind of with some human kind of undercurrent as well. It's very interesting. But I liked the scene. I liked the reveal. We knew it was happening anyway, but I liked that kind of 4-note rearing its head again, and the revelation was still quite potent. The magistrate kind of asks if putting the queen in this cage has made her go mad, and the queen saying things like reality has been split and time has been broken, and Seven says out loud that she knows that the Borg Queen has transtemporal consciousness. So basically, the Borg Queen is able to detect different timelines and recognize other selves, which makes sense because we get allusions to that in First Contact. When the Queen kind of says, "You think in such three-dimensional terms, how small you've become," and things like that. So we know that the Queen has capabilities that kind of extend beyond what we think are possible. So Jurati realizes that something's wrong with the timeline, and but they're kind of things are broken up very quickly by the announcement that General Picard will be docking shortly. So in terms of this scene, like this scene, good scene. Jurati didn't get my nerves, and actually I think this was some of her strongest stuff, and she actually gets a little bit better later on as well. I like some of that ad-libbing, and the comedy here didn't feel really forced and out of place. It just kind of seemed to strike the right note. It's furthering the idea that the magistrate is a little kind of concerned about his wife, because Seven is saying things and kind of betraying the mask that she's put on to try and obviously protect herself in this timeline. Interesting stuff. So we then go outside the palace, where you would assume that this is actually Picard's shuttle, which is in the process of docking. It's not. It's not, because Picard's there. There he is. Hello. And Picard, he's on the steps of the palace, and he's not enjoying what he's seeing, is he? He's not particularly happy. He is approached by another synthetic synth, who escorts him to the president's office, and Picard sees that Raffi and Elnor have arrived, and he's not particularly happy about Elnor being thrown to the ground. That make that 2 being thrown to the ground for Elnor in this episode, and it's not even the last time that happens. Yes. So back from commercial break, Elnor's being thrown to the ground, and he is there to be psycho-interrogated. So I don't know what that means. Obviously, in the Mirror universe, we know that they would probably utilize things like pain booths or something like that. Maybe that's what they were going to do. But basically, Raffi says that she is here to handle the interrogation herself, and this officer, challenges that and basically says that the orders have come from the magistrates, and maybe asks the question of who authorized Raffi's role in this interrogation. That's very quickly answered by Picard, who basically says, "It's me," with a very gruff, appropriately generalistic tone. Approaches this officer, gives her a bit of a dressing down, and orders Raffi to take the prisoner inside. Now, not much to say here. Obviously, this is just progressing us forward. I do want to quickly point out the uniforms. I think this is probably the best image to do so. So we actually saw this design in the last episode. It's actually the same design with the shoulder. It's not a symmetrical design anymore. But we saw this with the cadets in the last episode, and I kind of don't like that because are these cadets? I don't think so. I mean, this seems to be a dress uniform that's used throughout this version of Starfleet. These don't appear to be cadets. So obviously it's a way for the costume design to kind of reuse uniforms, but we saw this was clearly for a cadet, this specific design, and there doesn't seem to be any pips. So some potential explanations here is there may be no rank in this universe, although that would be kind of weird given the fact that we've already seen things like General, Colonel, and Lieutenant Colonels as well. So I'm assuming that there is rank. This person's collar does not fit well at all. But the other thing that I wanted to point out is we do see, I mean, obviously the costume designers for Star Trek are kind of shared throughout all of the productions. And there does seem to be a move at the moment to go with this kind of symbol, kind of embossed finish. We're going to see that in Strange New Worlds. We've seen that in some other shows as well. I think we see them in the main universe Picard uniforms as well. But the thing to note here is there's no command segregation. There's no different colors, which makes sense, right? Because I imagine that in this universe, they probably don't have any need for science department. They probably don't care about the exploration in the same way. It's all militaristic. They're all soldiers. They're all out there to go blow some shit up. I'll get onto the badge later on. But yeah, interesting. I mean, and it also makes sense. And it's also devoid of color. Grey. Everything just grey. Just grey everywhere. So, yeah, fitting for this dark and depressing universe. But Picard gives this character a dressing down. The camera lingers on this character, and she is a featured actress, a featured actor on this episode. So I wonder if she appears maybe in the next episode, maybe as Picard and crew are trying to escape. There we go. We can see that the shot does linger on. I don't know why. I mean, why would it do that if it's not there to kind of tease something else that's going to happen? So yeah, interesting. Here we get Raffi and Elnor kind of realize, they get that confirmation that it is their JL, their dear JL. It's not General Picard, and obviously that has them very, very relieved. We then move into the presidential courtyard, and this really nice shot. Mirrors have obviously been very prevalent throughout the episode, and it makes sense. I mean, to have an establishing shot be a mirror shot. I mean, it's very art school, it's very film school, but it's cool. I like it. It's a good shot. So the magistrate basically is, I think he's kind of like, are you okay? You're right. You don't seem to be yourself today. And General Picard, Raffi, and Elnor break that up. And the magistrate is kind of, his first question is, pardon the tone here, but what are you doing bringing a terrorist before the president? Which, is fair. He's doing his job. He's just doing his job, and he's doing a pretty good job for this universe, I guess. And I think Seven kind of just dismisses it. Says that there's some personal information that she wants to get out, or something like that. Seven basically says that she was the one who ordered having Elnor brought before her. Seven and Picard, they continue to kind of play up their roles, suggesting that Elnor has sensitive information, and they need to discuss that in private. During this scene, obviously, Raffi... probably not the time to talk about all this kind of stuff, but Raffi kind of brings up the whole married, and it's like, what? Just no, he doesn't know. He doesn't know that we know each other and we've been in a relationship in the main timeline. Just hold it. I'll explain. Anyway, so Seven reveals to Picard that there's a queen. And well, first of all, Picard goes, "Are you okay?" And this conversation is happening after the magistrate leaves, and Seven, in a great line, kind of says that she's the president of a xenophobic, authoritarian regime. So yeah, things are great with the exception of the fact that I'm the head of a brutal, racist, humanistic regime that is wiping out aliens all over the galaxy. But other than that, I'm fine. So Picard kind of realizes that Q has essentially, he's responsible for putting them into this position, which obviously kind of makes sense. And the they're now starting to believe that there's been a divergence in time, which obviously Picard is like, well, that's Q. That's what Q has done. So changed an event in the past to transform their present, and they kind of deduce that this isn't an alternate reality, but it's actually their own. But I mean, I don't really understand that line, because if something has been changed in the past, and we've seen it in Star Trek on plenty of occasions, that it would be an alternate reality, right? I don't know. Going back to the Borg Queen, Jonathan, thank you for joining. The woman playing the Borg Queen looks more similar to the actress that played the Borg Queen in Voyager. I actually disagree with that, simply because Susanna Thompson and Alice Krige had the exact same makeup, and this one doesn't. So, yeah. Interesting little tidbit here, and this is thanks to the internet for giving me lots and lots of useless information. Let's go back. Let's find a picture of the Queen. So this is Annie Wershing. Annie Wershing, I think. I know her from being in 24. She was also in Enterprise. She was in the episode Oasis as Trip's ghostly love interest in that episode, and yeah, you just picked up on that as well, Sister. So she's actually she's Trek alum, and kind of cool. Interestingly, her and Susanna Thompson actually appeared in another kind of time travel science fiction show. I can't remember the name of it. I only watched a couple of episodes, but it turns out that Anna Wershing killed Susanna Thompson's character in that show. So, yeah, little tidbit there. Back to the present, and let's skip forward a little bit. So basically, they've deduced that they're in an alternate time, an alternate reality. But I mean, yeah, so they're not in an alternate reality. They're actually in their own. But they are in an alternate reality. It's just weird kind of dialogue that they have there. Rios is returning to Earth, and again, here's kind of where we see, at the start, what I was talking about in terms of the shield only being up in certain areas. We don't see shield up here, and we see landmass over here. Maybe it's a way of conserving energy. Maybe, I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any shielding around that landmass there. So it seems very selective about where they're choosing to protect, which I find quite interesting. We're back in the lab, and Jurati and Borg Queen are engaged in conversation, or I think the Borg Queen is just talking, and she says something very interesting. She says, "This world is a lie, the fiction of the what if of what was." And Jurati, of course, retorts with, "Tell me about it, sister." And the Queen then detects that people are beaming in, obviously, as to her ability to sense things that are going on beyond the ability of us mere mortal humans. And of course, she is right, because we get our foursome beam in. And yes, this is obviously Picard, a reunion with the Borg Queen, and we get the return of that 4-note, but it's a little bit more brassy this time. So the last time we got it was very similar to the first appearance of the Borg on the Enterprise. When those two crew members in engineering are assimilated, you get the very kind of high. It's like. I can't do it very well, but I tried. Here it's brassy. It's very it's lower. It's like a different instrument's doing a dun, 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 dun. And I like it. It's a good callback. And obviously Picard, he has to go through all this all over again, and just probably would prefer for them not to be face to face, right? So Picard approaches the Queen, who does recognize him as Locutus, but then says that she doesn't at the same time. So Picard is Locutus and yet not at the same time. Picard is asking all sorts of questions as to what Q changed, what he did, and here's where the polluted totalitarian nightmare line comes in. And she answers that what has caused this is basically a temporal recession, a single change in time, And she calculates that the change occurred in Los Angeles in the year 2024, and advises that Picard needs to seek the Watcher residing there. What is the Watcher? I have no idea, but that's more mystery for us to unpack. And we know what the Watchers look like. They're the creatures that we've seen in trailers with bright white eyes. Now, there's been speculation as to who they are. I have no idea. My first thought would go to it probably being Q in disguise. But yeah, I think Sabko, I think that's a good way of getting Soji into the show. But here the Queen's kind of implying that the Watcher is perhaps some sort of alien race. So I don't know. Potentially the Watcher could take Soji's body, and that's how we get Issa Briones into the story. Because right now, it's kind of hard to see where Issa Briones kind of factors in. So, and we do see the Watcher with the bright irisless eyes take over different characters. So yeah, it could be all sorts of people, but perhaps the form that it finds and sticks with is perhaps it's just it's a temporary solution until the Watcher finds Soji to act as its body. I don't know. Again, speculation, but it's fun to speculate, right? This is why we do it. So they basically are now starting to work on a plan. How are they going to get to Los Angeles in the year 2024? And they're very quickly, they come to the conclusion that the Confederation at this point, they don't possess any technology superior to the Federation that we know, so time travel is not possible. Jurati kind of mentions that all of the stuff that they have kind of has a bit of an emphasis on torture, which is another Jurati gold line. Picard mentions that he knows that there is a crude way to get back in time using the slingshot effect around the sun, which is something that Kirk had done with the Enterprise and with the Bird of Prey in the voyage home. But Jurati points out that they'd need an intelligence capable of isolating the divergence and micro-shifting for any chronoton radiation being that kind of time radiation. And it's an interesting. I mean, we kind of knew that this was going to happen anyway. We'd seen in the trailers that Picard was going to do the slingshot, so we kind of knew it was happening. But I do like the fact that they're bringing up the fact that Kirk had done this in the past, so they're leaning on things that had been done before, rather than things that had been. Rather than just kind of going, oh, we're just going to make up this slingshot. No one's ever done it before that we know of, but we know in the universe that it has been done before. So it's not exactly new. And I like the fact that the show is kind of going and acknowledging the fact that it has been done before, kind of addressing its real world lore and events. So I like that. Obviously, the dilemma is then that they're going to have to take the Queen with them. And I think they're all a little bit apprehensive about how they do that. And Seven goes forth and basically says to the Queen, Picard says that he knows the Queen is capable of making these calculations that they would need to complete the slingshot, because in the past Kirk had Spock, so he'd be able to do all this. But Seven says that they have the Queen, and this then also obviously causes why would the Queen help them? And Seven, correctly kind of brings up the fact that all this talk of eradication, and asks the Queen how it felt to know that her people in this timeline have just been wiped out. And the Queen doesn't have an answer. She's on her own. And really, as we know, what's the worst thing that can happen to a Borg? Isolation. No connection with any of its kind. So Seven then says, will you help us? And the Queen says, yeah, I will, because I think I mean, what else? What's the alternative? Getting executed publicly in front of everyone? Not even the Borg Queen wants that. So they have the Queen on board. And everything seems fine. It seems like we have a solution. We have an answer. We have an ally in the Borg Queen. And all that's left is to have them beamed aboard and to get on with the rest of the story. And it seems like things are going to go pretty well. I do really quickly want to point out the Borg Queen and some of the differences here, and because the Borg Queen that we see here is clearly modelled after the Borg Queen that we know from First Contact and from subsequent episodes of Voyager, but it's not quite the same Borg Queen. I mean, obviously there are cosmetic changes to the character. It's not the exact same Queen in terms of what we know. These kind of dots are different. These ridges are different. These tubes look far more organic. But the similarities are there. However, we know that the Borg Queen kind of detaches and comes in two segments, and she would detach from her breast area and at the top of the shoulders, and that would be it. This whole suit here is mechanical. So why is it then the Borg Queen here seems to, the torso, like this actually seems to be part of her upper body? It seems weird. Like, why? And that looks like that's her spine. So there's clearly a change in how this Queen looks, and the detachment isn't there anymore. It's there. I don't know why this change has been made, but and again, it's not an issue. It's an observation. Continuity. I like continuity, but as we know from last season, the Borg do look different now. And and you can answer that away by saying that the Borg have obviously just assimilated other species now, and the Borg get an upgrade. But yeah, it's just interesting to point out. Anyway, so they have their kind of solution that they're all going to be beamed up and they're going to be able to kind of get out of there. And they hail Rios, who we've seen is now in Earth's orbit, and there are smiles around it. It seems like this plan is going to go. Well, it's going to go according to plan, which is great. So basically, 5 to beam up. They explain to Rios that they're going to be beaming up a Borg Queen, and Rios is like, I'm not really cool with that. They're able to talk it over. They're able to get over that little quibble, and Rios goes to beam them up. Everything seems to be going to plan, like I said. But the problem is it doesn't, and the transport isn't complete. And we find out that the Palace are actually putting shields up in anticipation of Eradication Day. And it's so she knew that because of the briefing that she read through in the morning. She knew that the shields were going up, and that's closely followed by the communication. So comms to anything on the outside have also gone down as well. So some interesting comments. So the Queen is a different race to the other queens. We don't know what race the Queen is. So we don't know. I mean, I'm maybe it is that these markings are actually that of her race, but it's unconfirmed, isn't it? It's unknown. But if we assume for a second that the Queen is, in the interest of the Borg attempting to be efficient, the Queen's come off a conveyor belt, right? And we've already seen multiple Queens look the same, because the Queen, so it's insinuated that there's a Borg Queen on the cube that gets destroyed in the Best of both worlds. So that Queen's destroyed, and then there's another Queen that looks exactly like her, and then there's another Queen in Voyager. So that Borg Queen in First Contact gets killed, and there's another Queen, and that Queen in Voyager gets killed, and then another Queen gets killed, and they all look exactly the same. So the Borg, they have a conveyor belt. So I think it's more likely the Queen is probably the same Queen as the one that we've seen before, same race, but maybe that conveyor belt has been upgraded with some new tech. And maybe they've made some modifications to the DNA strand of the model of the Queen. I don't know, for reasons unknown, and for reasons that we'll probably never find out. At the end of the day, the real world explanation is probably, well, we wanted to just take the Queen in a bit of a slightly different direction. And Sabko, you absolutely got it completely on the head there. More convenient for her to have hands later. Yeah, so that makes sense, right? If you just have this part of the Queen and no hands, yeah, probably something, she needs to do something with her hands later. So yeah, it makes sense. It's fine. But anyway, so they can't beam out at all, and things go wrong. The communications are blocked, and the queen is then moved out of her stasis chamber, presumably to then go and to be presented for the Eradication Day Ceremony. So they need to figure something out, right? Because the shields are up and they need to beam away. Luckily, they've not aroused suspicion, which I imagine if they were doing a beam out at the same time the shields were going up, there would be some sort of alert as to some sort of unauthorized beam out. We have to remember that this is the presidential palace, right? So you would imagine the security is going to be tight. I would have assumed that there was going to be a shield over the palace no matter what. So it kind of seems weird. I'm kind of surprised that no one kind of assumed that. I'm going to assume that. I'm surprised that no one assumed that there were just going to be shields up naturally in a place that's as secure and as important as this in the Confederacy. So again, it's another kind of thing that I find difficult to kind of explain away. These people just assume that they'd be able to beam themselves and a valuable piece of a Borg, an enemy of the state, just like that. I don't think so. Life doesn't go. It doesn't happen. Anyway, we find out that the Borg Queen is in transit, ready for the ceremony. So they've got to sort something out, and it's quite apparent, it's quite obvious that Picard and Seven, they're going to have to put that mask back on. They're going to have to pretend to be their dark selves again, at least until Jurati can sort this out. Their conversation is then broken up by the arrival of two security officers who, interestingly, are wearing non-cadet uniforms. So I pointed out earlier that you had outside the palace, you had the high collar single uniform variant. These guys are wearing a dark version of the duty uniform that we saw in the first episode. So make of that what you will. So yeah, Jurati has some stuff to do. She's got to figure this out. The magistrate comes in to summon his wife, and he's getting really suspicious right now. I mean, he's just walked in on these guys. Elnor's there. He doesn't really look like he's being interrogated, does he? What's going on? And an interesting line here is the magistrate is confused by Annika's behavior, thinking that she should be tested for telepathic incursion. And Seven just acts completely insulted by that, again, kind of putting the face on things. And Jurati then offers this kind of explanation about the reason why they're all a bit relaxed, and the Queen warned the Romulans about the Quat Milat infiltrating the palace. And it's really, this is probably my favorite Jurati line or kind of passage. And honestly, Thomas, I don't know why you're missing this. I'm just rambling at this point. I'm doing a Jurati. I'm just rambling. But Jurati goes into this wild kind of excuse here, and it's really, there are more ums than a Treklad broadcast here, and she's just making it up on the spot to the point where I'm convinced that Alison Pill probably just made this all up. She just ad-libbed this whole thing up on the spot, and it's great. It's a really cool thing. The magistrate, I mean, probably needs to get his head checked because he just buys it and he's okay with it. I really like the look on Picard's face. He's like, are you really buying this shit? So really good. Look, he's clearly getting himself into character. But they go to they're off to go and participate in the Eradication Ceremony, and Agnes, she's got some work to do if they're to get out of there. But just to go back, I mean, just a thing. Just why didn't they realize that beaming out of a palace surely isn't going to be as easy as they thought it was going to be? Maybe just in their haste and their desire to kind of just get out as quickly as possible, they were just like, maybe this will work. But didn't seem like the most calculated. It didn't seem very strategic. to get out. But obviously, they're going to go and fix that. We move into this. So we're now at night. And some interesting stuff that we see here. We hear another voiceover, a declaration that, again, what we heard earlier, a safe galaxy is a human galaxy. And it appears to be coming from this projection. And we see here Adam Soong, who we know this is. We know this is. And this is really, really fascinating. It's obvious that this character is probably the linchpin. He's probably the crucial point where, wherever the timeline split off into this nightmare, he was probably at the center of that. He's responsible for this. This seems to me to be like a twisted mirror of what we have seen in First Contact. So in First Contact, Zefram Cochrane is told that there'd be a statue of him, and he's reaching towards the stars. I mean, Adam Soong isn't quite reaching to the stars. He's got his hand extended, and in that hand appears to be the globe. It looks like that anyway. So it's quite similar, and it appears that in his future that Adam Soong is revered and celebrated and kind of held in that same company as perhaps what we do in our real world with people like George Washington, people in ancient history who were responsible for the world as we know it now. So we will get to that in future episodes, but my thoughts and theories on this is that we find Adam Soong in because they're gonna hit 2024, they're gonna reach that point, and that's probably where he is. Now, the world that we see here is angry, it's bitter, it's twisted, it's violent, it's vile, it's corrupt, it's just everything that is not what the Federation is. And my theory is that when we meet Adam Soong, he's probably not this grandiose figure. He's probably to use uncouth parlance, he's probably a basement dwelling incel. He's probably this kind of angry keyboard warrior who he's lost his job and he can't get a girlfriend, and he's got no friends, and he's just angry and bitter and twisted. How does someone like that go from the basement to Congress? And you imagine in a future as bleak and as desolate as the one that we're seeing in this episode, the people people like that, of that ilk, would be ruling the world, or would have laid the foundations for that world. So yeah, that's just my theory. I think the character Brent Spiner is going to be playing is just some sort of pathetic character who ultimately causes something big to happen, maybe some sort of terrorist attack that then inspires a splitting of the United States, maybe. And maybe that's the reason why it's called the Confederation. Maybe there is that divide once again, and the return to a civil war state or something like that. I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to kind of see how things are explained and how we get from where we are at the moment. And we're just 2 years off, aren't we? 2024. Also 2024, isn't that the Bell Riots? Isn't that when the Bell Riots happened? So what if Adam Soong kills Gabriel Bell in this timeline? I don't know. Wild speculation, but it's a cool, neat visual, and it lays the foundation, and it raises some interesting questions for things that we're going to see, hopefully answered in future episodes. So we then go to the palace hall itself, and the crowd has amassed. I don't know about you guys, but I got big Pink Floyd The Wall vibes here with Pink's hallucination. It seemed very in the flesh. Interesting little fact is this is actually a redress of the exact same hall where Picard gave his lovely speech in episode 1. So that's obviously very intentional from a production standpoint. You get to save money on having the same location, but it's all mirrors. And in that first episode we saw the various different flags, the different cultures, the diversity that makes the Federation what it is. There is no such diversity here. It is human, 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 human. We're the center of the universe. We've conquered everything. This is who we are. This is what we are. So very different, swathed in red, blood red. And Seven and Picard take the stage. They're greeted very enthusiastically. So one thing that I wish that we'd seen here is, it seemed to me from the visuals that we got, is it was a very kind of, they tried to mask it by making it seem like there were hundreds, if not thousands of people here, but I never really saw it that. It felt very kind of small scale, small stage to me. I think one way they could have done this, again, it would have been a budget thing, is given the fact that we in our world now, and if Adam soon is this kind of keyboard warrior on the internet all the time. So what if we had in the background the rest of the building made up by walls and panels of people online, like it was one giant Zoom call, and we also had maybe some sort of live chat, like what's going on here, but you guys are awesome in the live chat, where people in this twisted future future are just tweeting or just typing awful things like kill the bitch, kill the scum, humans first, humans forever. And it was just like a deluge of hate, and you see people just kind of staring through their webcams and their screens, and some of them perhaps with more money, because money would obviously be in this timeline. Some people are appearing via hollows and things like that. So I think that there was a way to potentially added a few more things to make this whole scene seem like it was bigger, and it was perhaps a bigger reflection on civilization and Earth society as a whole. But they kind of didn't go down that route, which is a shame. I mean, you can see here it's packed, but it is dark, so I'm assuming that we only had people down here, people up here, people up here. Doesn't seem to be many people up here, and there's probably no one up here. And what they could have done is they could have had some sort of special effect wall. They do it in Discovery all the time. They do it in Picard, where they could have just had loads and loads of like heads, just talking heads kind of up here, just spreading their hate and celebrating the eradication of the death of the Borg, which ordinarily would probably be okay, but it's not. It is not. The eradication of any species is not good. So Seven assumes the stage and begins to read through her speech, talking about, the celebration of eradication, unity through the strength, and it's very kind of mirror universe, but not mirror universe at all. It's very different, and adulation, adoration at these people on stage is just crazy, and these people are here to watch someone get murdered publicly. I mean, how backwards is that? Just shrieking with joy at what is going to be the death of someone, and we get this nice shot of Picard, who is going to be the executioner. Agnes is back in her lab. She's desperately trying to work out a way to find a gap through the shield so they can all beam out, and it's really on her at this moment. She needs to come up with something. She needs to come up with it quick, and she's scrambling to find something. She's working on a comm badge, which I'm not sure why the comm badge would do it, but also be careful with the tip of that comm badge, Jurati, because we find out they're very sharp. Back in the hall, Picard and Seven, they're kind of deliberately pacing these things, and they're trying to kind of buy time essentially, but she's under close guard, security are there, her husband the magistrate is there, they got to get a move on. So Picard assumes the position, and the Queen soon arrives to rapturous applause, and it's almost game time. It's almost time for the Queen to die brutally in front of these people. Now, the interesting thing here, we see Jurati, she's still frantically trying to sort this comm badge out so they can get out. An interesting thing here is Rios is asking for a bit of an update, and it immediately turns into a bit of a squabble. Really? And I think Rios even says, are you going to do this now? We can do this now? And that's what I was thinking. Why are you doing this now? Don't do it now. Wait until you're aboard. Wait until you give us some time. And just shut up and focus on finding that gap through the shield. Anyway, it's very modern Star Trek, kind of finding a distraction to just have a bit of a squabble. Okay, whatever. Anyway, we then move into what I can only assume is the shield generator room. Raffi takes Elnor in and basically just makes an excuse that she's going to need the terminal, and that Elnor was responsible for releasing some sort of virus into the system. She's going to have to purge it, and she leaves Elnor to at the mercy of these very gruff and smiling, very happy to know that they're about to get their hands on a Romulan. Lovely, nice people. An interesting little thing that I want to point out, because I love pointing out really useless stuff. This guy here is Rios's stunt double on the show. So nice to see him get a nice kind of on-screen moment, even if it's just kind of punching a Romulan and then eventually dying. So we're back in the hall, and what we're getting is the sequences, the spaces between the various locations, they're getting shorter, which is, obviously heightening the tension. They're running out of time, basically. And the Queen kind of has this look on her face like, you're not going to kill me. You're not going to kill me. You need me. So a nice kind of moment there. And but the times are right. They're running out of time. Picard, he can only stall for so long, and he's kind of gesturing to the crowd and kind of hyping them up to try and buy some time. But that's only going to get him so far. He then pulls out his phased pistol, which he's then going to hold to the Queen's head. Now, look, I mean, I'm obviously glad I don't live in this world. I mean, you could make an argument that the world is terrifying and brutal as it is, but in a public execution, and you're about to execute the very last Borg in existence, I don't know, just kind of seems weird that you would just choose to just use a gun. Guns are kind of quick and easy, or to paraphrase Heath Ledger's Joker. And in this twisted, demented, brutal, nightmarish, totalitarian nightmare that we are in at the moment, you'd imagine that maybe Picard would probably want to use a bat'leth or some sort of knife, a lance, or something like that. Something gruesome, something nasty. Maybe General Picard would. But obviously, this isn't General Picard. This is Jean-Luc Picard pretending to be General Picard. And obviously, he's just using what he has to hand. Maybe there is a nastier, more brutal, violent weapon to hand. But that was my thought. So he goes and he points the weapon at the Queen. He's obviously not going to pull it. And the Queen's like, well, you're not going to shoot me yet. You're not. And Jurati, Jurati, hurry up, make it happen. Rios is like, hurry up, make it happen. So you see how the spacing of the shots has really kind of sped up now. Literally like a boom, 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 boom. Really, really good editing, actually, in terms of like heightening the tension of the scene. Raffi is able to get the shield down. The security like, what the fuck are you doing? And Raffi then turns round to Elnor. You can go for it now. Which kind of, okay, fine. I mean, we know that Raffi is Elnor is a killing machine, and he's able to quite easily take out these guards. Now, it gets violent, and we find out that the Starfleet Delta here, the comm badge, isn't just a comm badge, and suspicions are confirmed. It's actually a knife. They double up as like shurikens, throwing objects, and they could just be used as a stabbing weapon. And Elnor slices this guy's throat with one of the Starfleet Delta comm badges, which is just brutal, but also just kind of like, fitting for this universe, that even the Delta that adorns the uniform is a weapon, can double up as a weapon. Elnor cuts the throat, kicks him through this panel, takes out the rest of these guys pretty easily. Now, my thoughts here are that he's handcuffed, so they were punching him, they were attacking him with intent to kill, obviously, right? So he had to protect himself. But the thing that I don't like about Elnor and the show is that they all too kind of quickly go to slitting throats and stabbing through the hearts and killing people. Where these people, maybe they deserve it in this timeline. They've committed heinous acts, but what does Star Trek kind of tell us that's probably not the solution and that's not the answer. And we get that at the end of Picard season 1 when Seven says the line, no more am I just going to kill someone just because that's what they deserve. And I obviously know that's something that maybe Elnor might not agree with, and he definitely doesn't agree with it here. But I guess the issue that I have is the scenes kind of play for laughs. And like Elnor's like, ha ha ha, Elnor's just pretending, he's just killed these guys. Oh, that's my boy, well done. It's like just because it's like these guys should be appalled at what they're doing. They're in a totalitarian nightmare. They're in a dystopian disaster piece. It's a horrible place to be in, but they're happy there. I don't like it, and I don't want to see it. Jurati, the stress is on again. More of that quick shot. And they are still stalling for time back in the hall. And Picard, I don't know, Picard's probably had his gun at her head now for 6 hours or something like that. And the crowd, they are starting to kind of sense that something's not quite right. They've been there for ages. They're probably getting hungry. They want to see death and they want to go home. And the magistrate is definitely confused. He's like, what are you doing? Why haven't you done this yet? Why haven't you taken her out? Hurry up. Come on. And Seven knows that they're running out of time. Jurati, the pressure's on. It's all going to happen. And maybe at this point, maybe the Queen's like, oh God, maybe he will do it. Maybe he will. Maybe this withering hand will put me down after all. And the crowd are just, the smiles, the cheers are gone, replaced with, what is going on? Hurry up, killer, killer, killer. And the magistrate sends security up. He's like, go. He sends the security up. And he knows that, Picard knows he's out of time. So what does he do? He takes a shot. And he has to protect the Queen because she is their only way of getting back to 2024. And the mask has to be removed. They have to kind of give the game up. And now it's really kind of do or die. They have to go. And yes, just right in the nick of time, of course, Jurati is able to find a workaround, find that hole in the grid and get them all beamed up. And they all get beamed up just in time. And the magistrate, yes, he's like, oh, where is she gone? My wife, no. So some great overacting. But, I guess, if my wife suddenly disappeared, I'd be somewhat perplexed. That is the look of someone who is perplexed, ladies and gentlemen. So we're on the La Sirena, and they're all there, all accounted for, including a Borg queen. And Rios is not particularly pleased with it, but he hasn't really got a choice at this point. Here's an interesting scene. So Jurati is moving the Queen in place, and basically moving. So she's being moved to a stasis tube near to the warp core. So I'm assuming this is the warp core. I never knew that was the warp core. I just thought it was. I actually thought that was the transporter pad for some reason at the beginning. No, that's the transporter pad. The warp core is at the back. Okay, cool. I'm up to date now. But basically, Jurati moves the Queen to the warp core to initiate some sort of plug-in, and this really interesting look happens, which harkens back to the exchange that they had at the beginning. This kind of little teacup and not belonging. And the Queen's able to kind of see these disparate timelines. So there's obviously going to be something that happens between these two. I mean, what that is, I have absolutely no idea. Another interesting thing as well is Rios is, I wouldn't say apoplectic, but he does not want the Queen hooked up to his ship. Now, but the thing is, though, is that's not his ship, is it? It's not strictly his ship. The La Sirena is his ship in the normal timeline, but in this timeline, it's Colonel Rios's ship, and he really wouldn't care about it. So, seems maybe that Rios's love of that ship transcends timelines. But it's just an interesting thing that I noticed anyway. One other thing, actually, and I know this happened miles in the past in the episode, but why is Rios on the La Sirena? It's weird. Obviously they needed a ship to get them from where they are to where they're going, which is 2024. But as a colonel, why would he not be on like a Confederation battle cruiser? Why wouldn't he be on something like the World Racer? Now, there is a line earlier on in the episode where his colleague kind of congratulates him on a bait and switch, which perhaps the bait and switch is he is actually in command of like a World Racer type ship. But they use those ships as a distraction, and the La Sirena ships were the actual kind of ships. That would make sense. That would answer that kind of question that I have. However, again, if we look at historical battles and engagements, it would always be that the senior officials, the generals, the colonels, the generals anyway, would kind of usually be on the fringes of battle. They'd be overseeing things. They wouldn't be getting involved in the action itself, right? Like, if you watch like the film Gladiator, and you get that battle in Germania at the beginning of the film. Obviously, Russell Crowe, he's a general, isn't he? So I guess it makes sense that he'd be in battle. But I kind of just assumed that you'd have your senior personnel, the people that would actually be dictating the battle plan, executing the battle plan, the strategy. They'd be kind of on the fringes. They'd be on the outside. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's there are in-universe answers for it, but I guess when I'm looking at these things really, really deeply, I'm just kind of like, I mean, if I was in his position, I'd be on the World Racer. If I was Twisted Universe Rios, I'd be sat somewhere eating grapes and I don't know, chilling with other people. So yeah, but no, I'm obviously being educated. Well done, thank you, Cestus. So a colonel would lead from the front, and it's the generals that would stay behind. Yeah, so that makes sense. It makes sense. I guess it makes sense that they would be on the La Sirenas as like a bait and switch. So yeah, it's fine. And yeah, I guess Sabco. Yeah, it's the concern isn't just about the ship. It's obviously giving control to the Borg Queen. Not very clever ordinarily. However, they need her to achieve their mission. So they power up the La Sirena. They think they're home dry and home free, and Rios is like, do not hook her up to my ship, please. But Jurati is like, no, not listening. We're gonna hook you up. We're gonna sort you out. Raffi reports that the Confederation fleet has been deployed to obviously rendezvous and or to meet them and to stop them from doing whatever they're trying to do, get away at this point. We see that Jurati goes to couple the Queen to the core, but the Queen actually pulls in and completes the lock herself, indicating that she's quite happy to receive this power. And doesn't she look happy? No, Rios is not happy. Rios is not happy at all. Yeah, he's really not happy. Don't do that to my ship, he says. So yeah, they think they're away, but as we find out, presidential authority has overridden the ship's shield system, which is referred to as the deflector system. Again, it's kind of a weird choice of words. I mean, you'd assume that you just override the shields, but okay, whatever. And a lone figure takes aim and shoots Elnor. Oh my goodness, what is happening? A very violent shot as well. And it is the magistrate, who is very closely then followed by two of his security guards who are flanking. Now, quite a bit of time happens between this shot and this. I mean, okay, not quite a lot of time, but probably enough time for one of them to maybe whip out a phaser and take him out. Because, I mean, it's just him and then his associates beam in. And obviously then the situation is kind of, it's not it's not in their favor. But beamed in, shoots him. Where was Rios? Surely Rios could have just pulled out a phase pistol and just subdued, but it didn't happen for whatever reason. Raffi is clearly distraught at what's happened to Elnor, and Elnor does not look in good shape at all. Raffi is in tears, and it's, we just kind of have to accept that, this kind of era of Star Trek is, very emo, very emotional. I can't imagine in previous Star Trek it's a grave situation, of course. It's not good. But usually, I do remember Starfleet officers kind of behaving with a little bit more, maybe a bit more stoicism, less feeling. But this is a more feeling time for sure, and I do buy that. But there are more pressing. She needs to get out of the situation before she can render aid to someone that she has probably taken as a bit of a surrogate son. I understand the feelings. I mean, no one wants to see that happen to a loved one, do they? But she still has something that she needs to do. She's got guns being aimed at her. The crisis is absolutely far from over. Hands are up. They're not in a good place at all. And a very cool line to end the show. The magistrate asks Picard what trophy of his head will say. How about Jean-Luc Picard, traitor, killed while rescuing a Borg? And that's it. That is the end of the episode. Packed with loads and loads of Easter eggs and just so much stuff. So much stuff has happened. And but we find ourselves, in a bit of a pickle as this episode ends. We thought that they were home dry, scot-free, and that actually happened on a number of occasions. They thought they were okay when they beamed out. And then again, when they finally beamed out and they thought that they were kind of they were going to be able to get away, obviously pursued by another fleet, but I guess they didn't expect that the powers of the presidential office would play out quite like that. So it leaves things very intriguingly left for episode 3. I mean, we already know how it's going to play out, but it doesn't mean that how they get there is not going to be interesting. As I said at the start of this, I like this episode. I actually think I like this episode a little bit more than the first one, which is just insane to say. I mean, it's not without its faults. It's not without its things that make me think that things aren't, things could be done a little bit better. I have questions that could be answered away by just saying Q did it. That's totally fine. There are some goofs kind of here and there, but it's fine. It's all kind of minuscule, really. Certain kind of, attitudes of characters, having arguments in the middle of trying to get themselves out of there is a little bit strange. Raffi's upset over Elnor being shot is obviously understandable, but the situation that they're in probably calls for a bit of a calmer head in that moment. I'm sure Elnor is going to be okay, and if he's not, that would be quite shocking. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, Star Trek, modern Star Trek at least, has not been shy about not minding killing off characters, on a whim. We'll have to see. But this future, this absolute kind of nightmarish future, just some things that we see, like I know it's probably a tiny small detail, but things like the lighting, the engines being different on a ship, the lack of care over the Earth. Look at the Earth; it looks lifeless. The green vegetation replaced with desolation. They're not looking after this planet because they're too focused on conquering other species and destroying alien worlds and wiping them out. And it's all just it's so different from what we know and what we've seen before. What it also is very, very different with as well, and the reason why I'm so surprised, and it's probably the reason why I actually liked it more than I thought, is, and again, if you're a frequent visitor of this channel and you've listened to some of my Discovery reviews and things like that, is I'm not the biggest fan of the mirror universe. I think used sparingly, it's fun, and it allows the actors to kind of flex some dramatic muscles and kind of do weird things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. But here, it was all far more subdued. It was far more kind of played straight. It wasn't, actors weren't kind of hamming it up. Even when Picard and Seven kind of had their masks on to kind of just play along, to kind of save themselves and pay kind of bide time, is they were still they were obviously playing it very differently to how they would usually do, but it wasn't completely different. They weren't overacting, and I wonder if that was direction from the showrunners and the writers. So very interesting there. The mirror universe here, you don't see personnel kind of murdering each other for promotions and things like that. There does seem to be this kind of togetherness, but togetherness to just eradicate alien life. So yeah, it's I found that quite refreshing because, look, I mean, I didn't mind some of the early Discovery Mirror Universe stuff, but as they kept going back to it, and the entire first half of the season was dedicated to it, it was a bit too much for me, and I think it kind of lost its appeal for me. My favorite kind of dark versions of Starfleet isn't necessarily the mirror universe. It's stuff that we saw in Living Witness, in Voyager. I really like that episode. I really like the darkened militant version of the Federation that's desperate in their war against the Klingon Empire in Yesterday's Enterprise. I like that kind of stuff. The mirror universe just kind of seems like an excuse for actors to get a little bit silly. We didn't see that here. It's very, very different. And I appreciated it, and it's the small details like the Delta doubling up as a knife, just these brutal kind of touches, and everything having a bit of a sadistic flourish, which really kind of just made everything stand out. It's don't get me wrong, it's an absolutely horrific version of what we know, but it's also kind of it's a version that I would like to see more of. And the possibilities are really endless. And now, maybe what we'll see is this universe be expanded upon in novels. I mean, Chris mentioned it earlier in the chat. You can absolutely bet your bottom dollar that we're going to see Star Trek Online include the CSS World Raiser. And we're probably going to see Eaglemoss wheel out that model as well. Probably at a premium as well, because we know that's what those guys do. But yeah, very, very cool. So those details as well. And going back to what I was talking about earlier on the subject of the SS World Raiser, it was very cool to see them take what we know, a model of the Enterprise D, and just twist it and contort it and just turn it into something that we've never seen it before. We've never ever seen that before, that configuration, and it doesn't feel like a kit bash. It just feels like the time has been taken to remodulate that ship and what it looks like in this timeline, and I appreciate that. So no expense has been spared. The beginning of the episode, the Q sequence, as I mentioned, yeah, so intriguing to kind of see what has driven Q to adopt this darker, harder edge. Like I said, we knew that we were going to get a different Q to what we'd seen before, but it makes sense. There's a reason for it to exist rather than just this is edgy Star Trek now. There's a reason, and I like that. So yeah, and the skull reveal, going through all of that, just yeah, so many little details, so many Easter eggs, so many things that don't have to be kind of, it's not on the nose stuff. It doesn't have to be mentioned like out loud. I mean, we get the Cisco name drop cameo. That's fine, but we also get lots of little subtle Easter eggs on screen and things like that. It feels like there's something, because if you're new to the Star Trek universe and you're watching this, you're not going to know who General Martok is, but that scene gives you a little bit for us who are nose deep in Star Trek lore and love it all, but if you're a first time viewer and if you're a newcomer to the franchise, then you can just there's enough information there for you to kind of understand what's gone on, the severity of what this Picard has done, and Yeah, I like that. That's good. Let's go to the chat. Let's see what some of you guys have to say. Jonathan, they could have left all these Discovery references out of this Picard series. Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, Picard, like it or not, it's a show. It's what we've got. And I think I mentioned this last week from a standpoint where it just kind of makes sense to just steal each other's assets and costumes, things like that. Fine, it's okay. But there has been an effort to try and kind of reconcile what we've seen in Discovery in the past and kind of put it into the universe that we know. I don't really have a problem with it. There are some things. No, I mean, if we saw a Discovery kind of Klingon, you know, the Klingons that we saw in Discovery season 1, I would be a little bit thrown. Like, say for example, if we get a cameo by like Michael Dorn and his makeup's completely different and he looks like a Discovery Klingon, I would just go, what is going on? That is what? No, that you can't do that. You just can't do that. It'd be weird. I mean, you can do it, but I don't think it'd be a very popular move. But no, when we were viewing Picard's kind of weapons wall, we saw, you know, the torchbearer, the lightbringer, whatever it is, that we saw in Discovery's first episode. But then we saw a Klingon disruptor rifle from the Search for Spock and from subsequent Klingon appearances. So I don't mind it so much. And you know, like it or not, Discovery is part of the Star Trek universe, and yeah, it is what it is. There should have been more references to Star Trek Enterprise. Yeah, well, yeah, I feel like we're going to get some. You know, I hope we're going to get references to Star Trek Enterprise. We can only hope, right? But I mean, you know, we got some. We got reference to Enterprise. I've not seen all of Discovery season 4 yet. I intend to once the series wraps, and then what I'm going to do probably over a weekend is watch them all, and then probably do a live stream where I go through it. But I watched 3 episodes, and it wasn't really doing it for me. But there was one moment where they kind of revealed the USS Archer, and it got a bit of an Enterprise moment. And I love Enterprise. Enterprise is one of my favorite Star Trek shows, as some of you may know. But that moment did nothing for me. It just felt a little bit too. It felt like it was just a pandering kind of moment, and it didn't really do it for me at all. But so we're getting Enterprise references. But yeah, I'd like to see some more. Sabko, I don't think the Queen came to assimilate anyone in the first episode. Probably they really need help. Yeah, I'm beginning to suspect that is actually the case. It would be a radical departure for the Borg. There's still this kind of theory that Picard's mother and the Queen that we see are probably linked in some way. I hope that Queen is not Picard's mum, because that would just, I don't know. I don't know. I don't like that idea. Also, given the fact that we've already seen an elderly Ygritte Picard. Is it Ygritte? Picard's mum. We've already seen an elderly Picard's mum. We saw her appear in an apparition in Where No One's Gone Before. So we know that she gets old. So yeah, I hope that doesn't happen. In terms of theories, I mean, I have no. Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea where they're going to go with it. That's fun, right? That's the fun of speculating here. What else have we got? This Borg Queen definitely wanted peace. She proved that by using stun weapons against the crew firing phasers at her. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe stunning people and firing at people isn't the best way to get peace. Maybe kind of explaining why you need power is probably the best way to get peace. Yeah, just my 2 cents there. There's a Lower Decks reference in Discovery of replicated bananas. Okay, I will look out for it. I think that the first Queen was Agnes. That would be interesting. I don't know. If you compare the two, Agnes is quite short, isn't she? And that Queen that we saw was quite a tall, slender woman. So I don't think the body shapes up too well. But it could be. It could be. Who knows? Canada Dry Hands. Thank you for joining. I'm sorry, but these reviews are just way too long. Don't watch them then. Sadko. Interesting thought, though. Yes, absolutely. Is Dr. Jurati a creation of Bruce Maddox? Old G, thank you for joining. I would say probably not. That would just be... I don't know why. Why? I don't know. No, I would say not. I think the whole Bruce Maddox thing is probably wrapped up, and they're probably not going to go down that route again. But yeah. So I like the fact, though, that there are so many theories. There are so many kind of schools of thought that we can go down. We do know that we're going to end up inevitably in Los Angeles 2024. We are going to meet Adam soon. He's probably going to be a bit of a loser, and I'm hoping the future can be changed by persuasion and helping this Adam chap just see the error of his ways, and hopefully there'll just be rehabilitation rather than explosions and phaser shots and all that kind of stuff. So, but here's to hoping anyway. Yeah, so that's it, really. I don't think I really have much else to say about Picard. Season 2, Episode 2, Penance. We don't know what the next episode title is going to be. It's not been revealed yet. Usually these things are revealed by Will Wheaton in the Writer's Room supplemental show. But I don't watch those because Will Wheaton is annoying. But yes, I'm going to leave it here. A little bit shorter than last week, but yeah, I think I had more to break down with the fleet and all that stuff last week. I'm going to take some time to think about what all this could lead to, because right now what we've seen in episode 1 is one thing, and this is a different thing, and I'm struggling to kind of match the two up. How do we go from spatial anomaly, peace-seeking Borg, to Confederation? And yeah, I mean, there's I'm hoping that it's all going to make sense in the end. One of the issues with Picard season 1 is it got a little bit too ambitious. It tried to do too many things, and it wasn't able to provide, to me anyway, answers that I found satisfactory. It wasn't able to wrap up all of its various threads. Now, the show, the two shows that we've had so far in season 2 are far tighter with pacing. They're flowing way better. Almost every conceivable element is better. I mean, there are still things that that I'm not like the biggest fan of, but I think that's going to be the case with anything. I mean, I can go and watch an episode of Voyager and just go, oh, that's kind of weird. So Star Trek is not immune to that. But what we've seen so far is way tighter, faster, more enjoyable, and with a lot of potential as we head into the third episode and the rest of the season. And that will do it for me this evening. Thank you so much for joining. If you've watched 5 minutes or 2 hours 40 minutes, these are long. I do appreciate that, but they're only going to get longer because I could talk about this for ages. Do hope you can join me next week. I will be back next Sunday, 8 p.m. GMT, to talk about the third episode. Like I said, I'm not watching Discovery at the moment, but with the penultimate episode, with the season finale airing next week, I will try and find some time to go through those, to watch all of those, and to give you my thoughts. Eventually, once Picard ends, we'll then be rolling on to Strange New Worlds, and I'll be doing episodic breakdowns in the same format, same long format. We'll be doing that. And then when we run out, I'll just go and do some classic stuff. That's what we'll do. I really like this format. I'm really glad I'm back. Really glad I'm back. Really glad that you could join me. Thank you so much. Until next week, stay happy, stay healthy, and live long and prosper.